Good morning, and welcome to the virtual worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person and where we support each other in our spiritual search for truth and meaning. My name is Reverend Kate Wilkinson, and I am so glad that you have joined us this week for our worship service, We Who Remain. I'm leading this worship service along with some of the members of our Social Action Committee. Here at the Meeting House, our amazing committees help to guide our spiritual lives. Our worship committee often helps us to look inward as we grow on our spiritual journey. Our pastoral care team supports us in caring for one another as we create and sustain beloved community. And our Social Action Committee helps us as a community to remember to look outward as well, to the concerns of our town, to those in the world who are struggling, to the people who are marginalized in our society, and to the care of our beautiful planet. This year, one of the main focuses of the work of the Social Action Committee is the environment and climate change. This morning, they help us to look at our role as stewards of the earth. We explore how to balance our gratitude for Earth's gifts, our grief and fear for the damage that we've done as humans, and our hope for how we still might be able to turn the trajectory of climate change around. So now, as I light our chalice here in the Meeting House, I invite you to light a candle wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected, even while we are apart.
What if, when I light the chalice, you hear an invitation to welcome gratitude for the earth? This week, as we got ready to help lead this worship service, the Social Action Committee talked about blessings from this planet. Here are a few things from our list: trees, whales, music in the rain and wind, sunrise, sunset. And now, with this flame of hope shedding light in your heart, what is your list?
I'm grateful for the sun.
I'm grateful for birds.
I am grateful for the cool waters.
I am grateful for elephants.
Love is the spirit of this meeting house. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your holy place. Golden sun going down, gentle blue giants spin us around, all through the night, safe till the morning light.
This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your holy place.
This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your holy place.
This pretty planet planet spinning through space. Your garden, your harbor, your holy place. Golden sun going down, gentle blue giants spin us around all through the night. Safe till the morning light. This pretty planet spinning through space. Your garden, your harbor, your holy place. Golden sun going down, gentle blue giants spin us around all through the night. Safe till the morning light.
Our reading this morning is a poem written recently by my friend and colleague Molly Hausch-Gordon. It's called We Who Remain. We who remain. The billionaires are making their exit strategy. Bezos and Branson headed for space, forgetting perhaps that they've already filled it with trash. Junk satellites float silently in clacking, cluttered orbit. There's no escaping the mess we've made in our hurry to bring it all under control. No place to outrun the consequences of such plunder. Still, the universe is a symphony we are too small to disrupt, even with our crinkly gum wrappers and melting icebergs. Uranus and Neptune elude our reach yet, and the stars beyond our stars have never dreamed of our little lives, though we stretch toward them, though we breathe their dust. Amid it all, I choose the earth, green and blue and gasping, all its ominous fracked timpani and blithe birdsong. I choose the long shot of repair and the orange and fuchsia sunsets that remain. Mars ain't the kind of place to raise a kid, you know? Bowie tempted us with stars, but the rocket man longed for home. I choose my children covered in mud and sticky, dripping popsicle, even as I imagine their doom. I choose the wideness of this small planet for them too. So, for all but Branson and Bezos, I ask you, what is the strategy for staying? Tangled up in gravity and fiber optic lines and each other? Maybe it starts in the ragged, earthy beat of our star-spattered breath.
Come to the land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like
When I was at a UU Ministers Conference several years ago, each of us picked a workshop to go to all week. I took one on staff leadership. Others took workshops on worship arts, on conflict resolution, on writing as a spiritual practice. One day when we were breaking for lunch, an entire workshop was crying. I was kind of glad that I hadn't signed up for whatever they had signed up for. It's so intense, they were saying. It's so sad. We're making space for our heartbreak, a friend told me, over soup and salad in the dining hall. It turns out that these folks had signed up for a workshop with the eco-feminist and philosopher Joanna Macy called Just Transition in a Time of Unraveling. It was mostly about our environmental crisis. When Joanna Macy leads a class or workshop, she starts by opening participants' hearts and minds to the suffering and pain, the grief of our hurting planet. It's a necessary first step, she says. And she's not the only one to approach environmentalism like this. In the book Sustainable Soul, Rebecca Hecking writes, "The first big step on the spiritual journey ahead is to come face to face with the truth of the ecological problems we now face as a species. When we fully grasp what we as a species have done to our only home, it can be heart-wrenching. In fact," she says, "if you're not crying a few tears or losing some sleep over these issues, then you haven't truly faced them." So let's take a good hard look at some of the environmental issues that should probably be keeping us up at night. Did you know that the Massachusetts Army National Guard has proposed building a machine gun range at Camp Edwards here on Cape Cod? The Guard intends to spend $11 million, clear-cut 170 acres of trees, and create a danger zone of 5,000 acres to catch projectiles. Camp Edwards, by the way, sits on top of the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve, the aquifer providing drinking water for 150,000 Cape residents. And just over the bridge in Plymouth, high-level nuclear waste is being stored at the closed-down Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station. Dry casks hold radioactive cesium because the spent fuel pool remains full. There are currently no plans to take the spent nuclear waste off-site. The company that oversaw the power plant while it was operating has turned things over to a new owner, so they are no longer liable for security, the cleanup of leaks, or emergency planning. The government allowed this. You may have noticed WAVE from the Social Action Committee tabling in front of the UU Meeting House this summer with posters to stop Line 3. Line 3 is a proposed pipeline expansion to bring nearly 1 million barrels a day of tar sands from Canada to Wisconsin. It was proposed by Enbridge, a Canadian pipeline company responsible for the largest inland oil spill ever in the U.S. Enbridge seeks to build this new pipeline corridor through untouched wetlands and the treaty territory of the Anishinaabe peoples. Wild rice is a centerpiece of Anishinaabe culture, and it grows in the watersheds Line 3 seeks to cross. If this goes forward, it will continue the legacy of destruction of indigenous peoples and territories. On August 11th, 39-year-old Jessica Resnicek will report to a federal women's prison in Waseca, Minnesota, to begin an 8-year sentence for damaging pieces of machinery involved in the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. You probably remember that the Dakota Access Pipeline was the controversial oil pipeline at the heart of the Standing Rock Sacred Encampment and demonstrations led by the Sioux tribe in North Dakota. Jessica has been indicted on 9 federal charges related to her 2016 pipeline vandalism. She participated in this civil disobedience, she told the court, because she feared oil would leak from the pipeline and further contaminate Iowa's drinking water. She and fellow climate activist Ruby Montoya have been ordered to pay $3.2 million in restitution to the pipeline owners. The Department of Justice has labeled their activity as terrorism. That is why she is getting such a long sentence. These are a few of the issues that find their way into our climate grief. We are facing a climate crisis, my colleague Peggy Clark writes. Climate change is already causing suffering for people around the world every day. Half the world's oxygen-producing tropical and temperate forests are now gone. Half the wetlands, 20% of the corals. 2/3 of the oceans are fished to capacity. Deforestation continues at just over an acre a second, and there are almost 200 dead zones in the seas. 1/3 of all freshwater fish are on the brink of extinction. 25% of plants and amphibians, 35% of birds and mammals. And everywhere, Earth's ice fields are melting. Species are disappearing 1,000 times faster than ever. We are in an extinction spasm, and the world of nature is disappearing by our own hand. You can cry. When I asked the Social Action Committee what their biggest concern for the Earth was, they actually all had the same answer.
This is the symbol for extinction. The circle is the planet, and the hourglass is for the time running out. My biggest concern is extinction of everything on this planet.
Extinction is my biggest concern for our planet.
My biggest concern for the earth is extinction.
My biggest concern is extinction.
It may seem extreme, but perhaps we have to face the possibilities of extinctions in order to motivate ourselves to be part of the great turning. Perhaps we have to reach that deep level of grief before we are willing to make some of the sacrifices that it will take to change the trajectory of our planet's future. Maybe we have to spend some lunch hours in tears and make space in our lives for our heartbreak so that we don't give in to the temptation to just look away. Now, thankfully, Joanna Macy didn't stop with the heartbreak in her workshop, and I don't want us to get stuck in the heartbreak either. I don't want us to skip it, but I don't want us to get stuck there. Macy doesn't. She leads people on to a concept of active hope. Active hope is something we do rather than have. It involves being clear about what we hope for, and then playing our role in the process of bringing that about. In her words, the journey of finding and offering our unique contribution to the great turning helps us to discover new strengths, open to a wider network of allies, and experience a deepening of our aliveness. When our responses are guided by the intention to act for the healing of our world, she says, the mess we're in not only becomes easier to face, our lives also become more meaningful and satisfying. Saving our biosphere is possible, but it will take a paradigm shift and a revolution of values to get there. I know that we are not all going to throw our bodies in front of construction equipment or risk going to jail, but this shift does depend on us at least paying attention, not putting our heads in the sand. We can't sit back while our Cape Cod forests are plowed under and water contaminated in order to build gun ranges. We can't stay quiet when giant companies abdicate their responsibility for their environmental messes, leaving us to take on all of the health risks as well as the danger for all growing things. We can't sit back and allow the U.S. government to label environmental activists terrorists. We can't let rich men go to space while we fund their trip by buying their cheap stuff. It will take all of us to alter the course that has been plotted for our world. And we can be part of that shift. Our faith calls us to be part of it. As individuals, there are many efforts we can make, even if they feel small. Signing petitions, meatless Mondays, carpooling, not filling our carts at the Christmas tree shop, supporting local farms, solarizing our houses, buying used clothing instead of new, eliminating the use of single-use plastics from our daily routines. But mostly it involves requiring large companies to be held accountable, advocating for legislative changes and investment in green energy development, being willing to make some sacrifices for the sake of the future of our planet, not looking away or passing the problems on to future generations. Remember, active hope. I asked some of our Social Action Committee members where their deep hope resides.
My deepest hope is that it's not too late.
My deepest hope is that we could end consumerism and the capitalist thrust, and that we could move toward deeper consciousness and oneness with one another and our planet.
My deep hope is for world cooperation.
My deepest hope is that everyone follows Greta.
I know that you might be hearing the messages of environmentalism from a lot of places. What makes this a message for worship is that our heartache for the earth is part of what we carry with us when we are honest about all that is broken in this world. That we need each other to move from despair to active hope. And that nurtured and sustained by our faith and our faith community, we can commit to making sacrifices and changes that can save our planet and perhaps even enrich our lives in the process. As Denise Levertov writes in her poem, Beginners,
But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud.
How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be, to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors.
Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent.
Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended, too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven.
we have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitudes in the communion of struggle. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud. So much is in bud. Thank you for joining us this morning in our gratitude, in our sadness, in our commitment, and in our hope. Amen. And blessed be.
This pretty planet spinning through space, your garden, your harbor, your home.